Hey, everybody, it's Natalie B. McKenzie with The Whole Woman, and welcome to this week's episode of Living Life Authentically with yours truly. So, it's the day after the Oscars, and guess what? It's also the day after Women Honoring Women. Here at The Whole Woman, we celebrated women on the last Sunday of Women's History Month, as we do every year. And our event is titled Women Honoring Women. So, we had three amazing honorees: Miss Theodora Lacey, civil rights activist and community activist. We also honored Deb Belfaro, a health advocate. We also honored none other than Rosalind Young Daniels. And boy, did we get an amazing turnout from the community. One of the first times we were all able to gather in 2 years. We had a great on-screen audience, otherwise known as virtual guests. We enjoyed them. We thank them also for joining us. And it was spectacular. Of course, check out our Instagram, our Facebook page. You'll see so many fun photos. And if we get a chance to, before the end of today, we will share some with you. Well, our guest today is none other than someone who is so timely to talk with. She is a communication expert, a conflict resolution strategist, diversity, equity, and inclusion facilitator, speaker, leadership coach, and an author. I think that makes her uniquely qualified to talk about some of the things that we have experienced here in these United States in the last 24 hours. Yes, you know what I'm talking about. But she created the Soul of Conflict Summit, a groundbreaking online forum designed to create deep dialogue around conflict, old wounds, and knowing that leaders who willingly and skillfully engage in conflict will be our most successful leaders. Without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, this amazing woman has authored a book. She has titled conducted TED Talks. She's just amazing. Let's just bring her in because, as she says in one of her How to Be Bold Leader and Develop a Kick-Ass, High-Functioning, Happy AF Team, she is a kick-ass leader. Help me welcome Lynne Maureen Hurdle.
Hello, hello, hello.
Hello, Lynne. How are you?
Oh, I am great, actually.
I'm
Yeah.
loving the ethnic vibe I'm getting from the picture
Yeah.
frame behind you, the glasses, the hair. I am loving it. Thank you for
Thank you.
joining us.
Oh, thank you for having me.
It's our pleasure. The timing that we have had in talking with you is impeccable. We
Yes.
are privileged that you're able to join us today. But before we get into that, Lynne, who are you? Where did you come from with all this great thinking and awesome skills?
Yes. Well, you talk about amazing women, right? I come from Eleanor Blassingame Hurdle and David Leroy Hurdle, my parents, and I grew up. I'm a Bronx girl, born and raised, stayed, and schooled in the Bronx, and that is where I come from.
Wow. And so you mentioned your parents. Do you have any
I
siblings?
have a fabulous sister, my sister Gail, and we are 13 months apart, so very, very close.
Twins.
Yes.
Irish twins. I
Yes,
love
that's
it.
what I believe they're called. Yes.
That's amazing. So you grew up in the Bronx, right here in New York.
Yes.
Tell me what you were like. And your mother's name is beautiful.
Thank
Oh
you.
my goodness. And if she is anything like the name, well, I would love to meet her. So
Oh, well,
tell us about growing up in the Bronx with your Irish twin
yeah.
and give us context of time and culture. What was going on as you were growing up?
Oh, so a lot was going on when I was growing up because I grew up really coming into the 60s, and we started out living in the South Bronx, which is at the time was predominantly African American and Latino. And then my parents decided that the better education was in the Northwest Bronx. And so we moved into an all white neighborhood when I was 7 years old.
Mm,
And the experience was it was a complete culture shock in so many ways, particularly with everything that was going on with civil rights movement. And my sister and I really experienced, yes, we had a good education, but we also struggled with the culture. The good part was that we have a large extended family, and so we would go back to the South Bronx and be with my grandmother and my cousins and my aunts, uncle, all that, and get immersed in that culture. But it was definitely an adjustment to
Mm.
do that. Yes. And I was a creative child. That was the other problem with the educational system and me. I started dancing when I was 3, went to dance school. I started writing plays and movies and poetry when I was 8. And I sang and I acted. I was creative, and really the education system didn't have a lot of room for creativity. My sister was much more on the academic side, and so it was nice that we had that mix. But I felt like I got lost in the sauce until I went to high school, where I went to the High School of Music and Art. That's what it was then. Right now it's LaGuardia, but
Uh-huh.
I went as a voice major, and I was really able to express myself creatively there.
Now, tell me about this experience as you were growing up and you found an outlet for your creative side. What was your creative experience, and what's your talent, as they would say?
Yeah, well, I sing. Yeah, that I grew up in singing in gospel choir. My church actually was very forward thinking and created a choir just for teenagers. And so I spent a lot of years singing and traveling all over the city, singing in different churches. I wrote and acted in plays. Unfortunately, I didn't get cast in a lot of plays when I was in like elementary school, because
Oh,
they didn't see me, the black girl, in, as in Peter Pan or Mary Poppins. That,
uh-huh.
yeah. So I auditioned, but I didn't get those. So I would write my own, and I would just do my own thing in terms of playing things out, even at my home. So I really wanted to dance, and so I took dance classes. I went to Alvin Ailey, Dance Theater of Harlem. I took classes there and was able to really be creative and express myself there.
So, as you were going through high school, what were you doing with your sister, and how is all this playing out? Did you go to the same high school?
No, she went to Hunter High School, which very rigorously academic. I was at music and art, so we would be home together, and we would always have a good time. And we would, at sometimes we would act things out. My parents gave a lot of parties, and at the parties we would imitate everybody and how they danced and all of their different styles and ways of being. And we spent a lot of time really laughing. My dad was into Westerns, and so we spent a lot of time watching Westerns. My mom was just very, very creative in terms of, she sewed all of our clothes for the longest time, and she sewed all the gowns for our gospel choir. But then she was also really ahead of her time. She worked for what was Philip Morris at the time, and she was running their computer program, and she was the troubleshooter.
Wow.
She was the person that they contacted when there were things wrong with the computers. So she was really ahead of her time and made sure that we were exposed to as much as possible.
Wow, what a rich life, what a rich cultural experience you had. And you mentioned the dynamics of the culture shock when you moved from one neighborhood to the next. So after you did high school, and here you're having this great experience at the in a more creative school, and you're singing in the choir and you're getting your tap dance on.
Yeah, that's right.
Where did you end up going to college, and what did you study?
I went to Syracuse University, and I always knew that out of all of the creative things that I like to do, I wanted to be a theater major. And so I was accepted into their theater program. But I will tell you that right before high school, I experienced an incident that ended up changing the course of my life and actually brought me to where I am now. And that was, I was on a bus when it was surrounded by 50 young white males in red bandanas with baseball bats. And essentially, they were trying to really get the Black people on the bus, which was only three of us, including the bus driver, to come off to, I'm assuming, to beat us. And the bus driver wouldn't open the door, and they tried to
Wait a
pull us
minute.
from the bus.
Where did this happen?
In the Bronx. Yeah, in the
In what
Bronx.
year?
And well, I was 17. What year was that?
Oh,
70,
okay.
75, something like that. Yeah, 75,
Wow.
76. And so I was able to get off the bus because another bus came across the street that was filled with Black kids, and they ran over there. And I was able to get off the bus, and there was a young man, teenager, who was on the bus with me, who had just moved into the neighborhood, who was, of course, terrified. And I showed him the way home. And on the way to my house, I had this voice saying, I don't know how, but I'm supposed to do something about bringing people together around this issue. And
Wow.
so I went off to Syracuse the next year. I was a theater major for a year, and they started a brand new program called Nonviolent Conflict and Change. And I switched into that major, and I've been doing conflict resolution work ever since.
I've got goosebumps because what a traumatic experience, but how bold and brave of you to decide to take this on. Okay, so you're in college, you take this course, which is so forward thinking. I've heard amazing things about Syracuse University, but to think that in the 70s they had a program such as this, that's quite groundbreaking.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me about life as you're studying and preparing to be who you are today,
Right.
because I know there's a whole lot that happened between then and now, and though I'm chomping at the bits to get into what you do now, I want to get a little bit more
Right.
about Lynne, because just having that epiphany and going to school does not prepare you to be the badass that you are today.
Yeah.
So,
Thank you. Yeah. Well, we've studied all of the different folks like Dr. King and Gandhi, and really looked at conflict and how people come to conflict and resolve it. And actually, during the study, because I had been a theater major, I approached each homework assignment by acting things out, and they were like, "Oh my gosh!" I mean, I would come in costume. I'd be like, "You were there in the wrong major. You should be in theater." Like, no, I just came from there. But I really loved it. But I really felt like it isn't just what's on the paper. Like, who are these people that are in conflict, and who are these people that are helping people? So how do I bring them alive? And interestingly enough, it's one of the things that makes my work now stand out, is that I do a lot of role playing. I do have people go through scenarios. But after college, I went into mediation. I went to well, actually, I had, because I changed my major, I had to then do an extra year, and I did that. I came back to the city, and I did my last year at John Jay College, and that was where I took a year-long course on mediation in order to certify me to mediate cases in the civil courts. And I met my husband
oh,
during that course. We were together during that time. And so I mediated cases for a long time. I went into school mediation, which was really brand new. And I was able to be in the very first program for schools in New York City, helping young people be trained as mediators so they could mediate the fights and conflicts that were happening in the schools, in their schools at the time. And then really decided that I worked for a nonprofit as their director of trainings. I put together trainings on how do you teach conflict resolution to adults and to young people. And when my husband Warren and I decided we wanted to have a family, I went out on my own to try to get a business going in consulting with businesses around conflict resolution. At that time, I was mostly in the nonprofit space, and then 7 years ago, I decided I wanted to really do the entrepreneur thing in a way where I could actually make some money and go into the corporate space and really coaching space and really help people much more on a one-to-one basis, but certainly in spaces where I could really help people on the job, in the work experience. And so 7 years ago, I'm in this business group and someone says, you need a name, like you're the conflict closer. And it stuck. And that's what people call me. They call me the conflict closer. I like it. And it just brings together for me all the things that I'm trying to do with people around conflict.
And let's talk about the conflict closer. Because during the pandemic, how did the pandemic impact your business? But I can't hold this question back anymore. During the pandemic, so many things were going on. So much conflict came about. And we have a residue of that now. Get vaccinated. Don't be vaccinated. You're bad if you are. You're bad if you're not. Wear a mask. Don't wear a mask. Oh my God. Public health became a political issue.
Yeah.
People are at odds. Families break up. People stop talking with their friends. All that. And then some. And then we have last night.
Yeah.
Public television.
Yes.
Worldwide.
Yeah.
And we approach everything here with grace, and having the conflict closer, having you, Lynne, here is, I think, a perfect opportunity. How can we unpack what happened last night?
Yeah, I'm so glad you started with like all of the pressures around the pandemic, because the way that I'm looking at it is I believe that Will Smith fired a warning shot for all of us, because there is a tremendous amount of pressure that people are under. This is unprecedented times in so many ways, and we are exposed to all of it, even outside of what's happening in our homes, in our schools, in families, and workplaces. And so people are dealing with the level of stress that has not been seen in the same way. And we're talking globally, right? Because COVID was global. So that you're not just seeing yourself and your family or your country, but so many other countries. And so for me, I say, before you judge Will harshly, before you say, oh, that would never be me, before you say that would be me, right? Or before you think someone is superhuman and incapable of losing it in public, or you start thinking you know so much about someone when you really don't know what's underneath, I want you to understand that things like this could happen to any of us. Am I saying that any of us could slap somebody? Possibly, but what I'm really saying is that any one of us can be driven to the point of acting out of our normal character.
Lynne, you said something that I want to hold on to. You said the word before several times.
Yes.
And from looking at your work, the word before is a big deal.
Yes.
Let's talk about before.
Yes. Yeah. So this is what I want to say to people. I picked the word before because that's what I want you to do, right? Before you take any particular action after having been activated, right, by your feelings, because we're all activated by our feelings. Remember the acronym before. B, breathe in. 4-second breath in, 4-second hold it. E, exhale out. 4-second release, breath out. And then repeat that 4 times. And then F, feel. Sit in what you're feeling and really feel it. We dismiss feelings. We ignore it. We just don't want to deal with them. Sit in it. What does it feel like? I know it doesn't feel good, right? If you're feeling embarrassed, humiliated, exhausted, sit in that and what does it feel like? And then always own it. How is it making you feel? Admit it to yourself. It's making me feel like I want to punch somebody. It's making me feel like I want to just go off on folks in here or cuss everybody out, right? Own that. That's what it's making you feel. But then R is for reflect. What's going to happen if you do this? is that really what you want? And are there some other options? Like, we limit ourselves because our emotions are so high in the moment. We limit ourselves to that one possible scenario. But if we reflect on it, can we see that there might be some other options? So let's take Will Smith, for example, right? Could there have been an option to actually, since you had the power to walk up those stairs, right? While you're walking up those stairs, I wish you had breathed, brother. And then gone and then taking the mic, because you're Will Smith. We get it, right? It's your night in so many ways. Taking that mic and say, yo, whatever you want to say, Chris, uncalled for, please do not do this to my wife. Recognize your comedian, recognize his jokes, but brother, too far, and then walk off the stage. So reflect, because that was another option that I don't know if he played with, but we all can, if we really take that time, particularly continuing the breathing, we can see another way out. Because the other thing that you want to do is take that E. What is the most excellent response here for who I am? Because I'm heartbroken for Will Smith, because I was counting on today being about, this brother won that Oscar. Oh my goodness. All of the hard work, everything that he went through, and here's his moment, and you're going to give it to him. And now all we're talking about is this incident. And so I just feel like, wow, there were so many consequences to this, because this isn't over, right? I know that I saw that he and Chris Rock spoke. This isn't over in terms of how long people are going to carry this on. But in terms of really giving him his due, the choice that he made took that away. That's why I'm really heartbroken.
Lynne, it brought to the forefront something that we do not talk about. A couple of things. Now, there's something that I learned during these last 24 hours. Will Smith authored a book called Will.
Yes.
And I don't know how many people read this book.
I did.
One of the things he talked about repeatedly was how, as a man, he felt powerless watching his father beat his mother for breakfast, lunch, and dinner as a boy, and could do nothing as she looked up at him from the floor.
That's right.
And now, don't get me wrong, two wrongs don't make a right. Please. But what did he feel in that moment? Might he have felt, because we don't know, when he looked up and Jada's eyes looked at him with the pain in them, and he saw his queen being diminished in a moment in time when they're all on stage.
Yes, that's right. Absolutely. And so much, I deal with culture and conflict, and there's so many cultural inferences here, right? So yes, his queen, and here she is looking to him, and here's this history of not standing up and wanting to stand up, and also on top of growing up in a household where there's trauma. And yes, he talks about the work that he's done on it in this book, but you and I know there's always residue, right, that can pop up at any time. And then on top of that, this is a brother doing this, what? To my what? And you know me, we know each other. And the choice that Chris Rock had, it wasn't his show, so he didn't have to do an hour long of jokes. He only had a very small period of time to do jokes. So why choose that one, right, for Jada on Will's night? Right. I mean, there's so many things that go into that could have stirred all of that in Will. And look, if people are for violence and they feel like he did the right thing, well, that's on you. I don't necessarily think that. I think he had other choices, but I understand, though, when someone just loses it, and we hold that person in such high esteem because that's who they seem to be, right? Will is the person who wouldn't use violence. He really grew up on that. He didn't even curse, all of those kinds of things. So I really do feel like he was in a moment that was very difficult. Here we had Chris Rock, who alopecia, brother, you did a documentary on black hair.
Yes. Don't touch a woman's hair. Sister's hair.
on, come
Yes.
on. But
Yes.
here's the thing. I see this all the time in my work, right? A moment that changes relationships, changes everything, right? That you didn't plan. And because of that choice, people are at odds. And so to be able to look at, they both made, in my opinion, choices that were not the best for the
So,
situation.
Lynn, one of the things that one of the articles you wrote is Breaking Culture,
Yes.
Conflict and Cultural Breakthroughs for Psychology Today. Um, and I think about this culture that we live in. And again, you did a TED talk on the weight of hate, but
Mhm.
we live in a culture that is weighted down by hate.
Yes.
And this culture has been very unkind and abusive to us women of color.
Hmm. Hmm.
And when a man, because I'm telling you, my husband was incensed as a husband, and he flat out said, oh, McKenzie, he said, if someone hurts my wife, I'm going for them.
Hmm.
Mind you, he's the most mild mannered. He's so
Right.
kind. Everybody
Right.
loves him. He's not a violent person. He is all about stop and take a deep breath and chill out. It's a mouse
Hmm.
turd.
Hmm.
But he was so fired up that that's my wife. You can't hurt my wife.
Right. Right.
And so it's like, whoo, baby. It's a tough one.
It
And
is a tough one, but it's also, and again, culture tied in, because the other thing too is I'm like, Will, we grew up on this now. We grew up how you act, right? In front of folks. We out in public. It's a huge event. Oscar's so white. Remember that? There's a reason for that. Like, we don't do certain things. And here we go. So that told me again, like I said, any of us can come out of our character, particularly with the stress that we are under now, the pressures. Don't say no, never would be me, right? Because we do not know with that kind of stress. And if it would be you, I still want you to understand before, because in a moment, a decision that you make, even though you are right in the reason, in that moment, you could change everything. And I'm sorry to say, it's why too many of our young people have the consequences that they have. Yes, we are in a it's systemic racist system, no question. I know that very well. But
Mhm.
operating within that system, you understand, right, that the consequences are a lot higher. So we really do have to have choices for ourselves. If after you do before and the excellent choice you come to is, yep, I just got to do this, well, then at least I know that you considered the options and are ready to settle for the consequences, whatever they may be. But I do think that we need to be aware that right now, more than ever, any of us could do something totally out of character. And I want people to not go to that place. I want you to really remember before and do this so that you can make the best choice possible in the moment.
Lynn, tell us how we can stay in touch with you because there is so much more that we have to do here.
Yes. So LynneMaureenHurdle.com is my website. Yep, you can reach me at IG at Conflict Closer, Facebook Lynne Maureen Hurdle. And if you want to have some time in a consultation, if you go to my website, you'll see that you can get some time with me to talk about being a client or like what's happening that you are trying to deal with at the moment.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have been talking with the Conflict Closer, very timely. Lynn, we thank you so much. You can talk with her more, find her on IG, the Conflict Closer, or I'm sorry, there's no the on IG, it's Conflict Closer. You can find her on Facebook at Lynne Maureen Hurdle, and her website is LynneMaureenHurdle.com. We thank you so much for joining with us. And yes, we will breathe for 4 seconds. And hold
Yes.
it and do it again
Lisa
4
again,
times.
all the way out. Yes.
I'm
And
big on
please,
consequences.
please, my book is on Amazon. You can pick up a copy there, and it talks much more about how you really do put these techniques to work for you.
Thank you so much, Lynn. We'll
Thank
be
you.
talking more with you in the future. Thanks for joining us. So, ladies and gentlemen, at the top of the show, we talked about yesterday's exciting Women Honoring Women event and the great honorees we had. You know, because we are so cognizant of those who support us and stand by us, elevate us, kneel so we can get on their shoulders, we also honored two men. We highlighted two men who have been there for the whole woman all the years of us doing events. And one of them is pictured here. His name is Joe Capoli. And Joe Capoli is just a great friend, a great human being. And he's been New Jersey's Man of the Year for LLS Foundation. Our second male highlight, and we gave them the Men of Valor Award because we call them our silent heroes. The other one was Glenn Poppy. And unfortunately, Glenn was unwell and not able to join us yesterday. But Glenn, we love you. We send you hugs. We pray that you will get well soon. And to our honorees, we thank you for gracing us. We thank you for the work that you do. And photographed in the red right here, standing next to me, is Deb Belfato. Then, of course, there's Glenn Poppy. I'm sorry, Joe Capoli. And standing next to Joe in the orange dress is the beautiful and lovely Rosalind Young Daniels. Standing next to her is Miss Theodora Smiley Lacey, community activist, civil rights activist. It was a great event. Of course, we featured and gave awesome gifts to all our guests. But remember, if you're running low on your hand sanitizer, feel free to visit us at twww.thewholewoman.com and go to our shop site so you can get more hand sanitizer. And you can also get some body cream. Lady Mist is still available. We also still have the Lady Mist fingertips, so I can't show it to you. But stay tuned. We have so much coming up. And remember, go to bit.ly dot retreats for the Whole Woman Retreats information. We'll give you information on that. That's coming up in April. I'm the Whole Woman, ladies and gentlemen, and I'm Natalie B. McKenzie. I wish you enough life to live, enough joy to give, enough love to share. I wish you enough. Good night.